To celebrate 10,000 subscribers, I want to make a Q&A, ask me anything sort of video sometime, so go ahead and ask me anything in the comments, and I'll flippantly cherry pick the ones I want to answer in true AMA fashion. Thanks. If you cast your mind back a few internet years to July 1st, 2017, you might recall that I tried a little experiment by upscaling the graphics on the DS games in this series. Let's just say that wasn't too well received, there were many colourful comments, but I think that your boy Nathan Braun summed up the general consensus in a way that only a true wordsmith could. Don't upscale, dude. I want to see those dirty pixels all over my face. So I won't upscale in this video, maybe in the future I'll show both upscaled and native for comparison, but let's take it back to the basics this time around. Ashphalt Urban GT by Gameloft and Ubisoft is an arcade racer which runs at a silky smooth 60 frames per second. Though it's pleasant and colourful, it's not the most technically advanced DS game, but I wanted to mention it because it was initially released in November of 2004, which makes it a launch title. And as a launch title, it is extraordinary. I particularly like the visual design behind each of the 9 tracks, they feel distinct and detailed. This game also marks the beginning of the Ashphalt series, which has been much more successful on phones and tablets. I haven't played many of them, but from the ones I have played, they seem to define themselves on their pretty graphics and mediocre gameplay, and that includes this game. Still, the graphics are indeed pretty. Call of Duty Black Ops on the DS is the 4th and final COD game on the system, all of which were developed by N-Space, the same developers behind 007 Bloodstone from the last video. Both games run on the same engine and were released in the same week in 2010. As you can see, what they achieved here is pretty stunning. I've always found it fascinating to see how the prolific series has been boiled down to systems like the Wii, the DS, and the N-Gage. And the results have always been impressive. It's relatively highly produced with many environments and not too many overused assets. The sound fidelity and design is particularly good, especially the quality of the voices. Unfortunately, I found it otherwise pretty bland, but it's still an interesting game to try out. It even features the wave-based zombie mode, which is mildly interesting. Also, the frame rate is better on real hardware, so disregard the lag you see in this video. The game I get the most requests for this series is the Japanese action RPG Soul Lato Robo Red the Hunter. Released in 2010 in Japan and in 2011 everywhere else, and developed by CyberConnect 2, who are most famous for their Dot Hack and Naruto games, Soul Lato Robo boasts impressive art direction and tech. Featuring high poly models and environments, it feels consistently well produced and considerately designed. I especially love how it uses 2D elements for some backgrounds and effects. Just look at the background in this town, or the characters in this scene. Something to note is that, unlike most DS titles, the gameplay here takes place on the bottom screen, which I initially thought might be to save resources because maybe the bottom screen runs at a lower res or something, but it doesn't. Both screens are exactly the same outside of touch capability, so it's just an interesting design choice. Also, the cutscenes are surprisingly well made and impressive, and they do that cool thing where they display over both screens. This game just seems really solid, check it out if it looks up your alley. In the last video we covered Firebrand Games' Race Driver Grid, and a little over a year later they released Dirt 2 in 2009. Being on the same engine, this is a very similar game on a technical front, especially because they haven't significantly upgraded it visually, but it's still interesting to see the engine adapted to a wider array of environments. It runs at a smooth frame rate, and I also found it to be a much more fun game than Grid. The driving physics don't feel like complete wank this time around. Dementium 2 is Renegade Kid's third game after Dementium 1 and Moon, both of which I covered in the first video in this series. This is by far the best of the three. The textures are impossibly high quality, the modelling is great, especially on the enemy character models, and it all somehow runs at a perfect 60 frames per second. They don't overuse assets and environments as much as they did in previous games, and it just generally comes across as a higher quality experience. In the same vein as old Silent Hill games or found footage movies, the lo-fi nature of this game adds to the spooky atmosphere. All up, I'm just taken aback by Dementium 2. It is stunning and a real achievement on the Nintendo DS. And there's another 5 graphically impressive DS games. Now I don't want to get too soppy, but man am I stoked that I hit 10k. It's kind of amazing. I'm really happy. Thanks everyone. Like I said at the start of this video, I'm planning on making that Q&A video, and I think that'll be a fun experience. Just don't ask weird shit about my feet